Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the 1904 Club, the Hull City podcast from the Hull Daily Mail. And Catherine, we're down to two. We've had some late withdrawals this morning. Prutz and Fletch have bailed at the 11th hour. So it's just me and thee. Well, until we've got a special guest coming on. How are you?
I'm not bad, Baz. It's that time of the season, isn't it? People start to drop out, pick up injuries or have trains cancelled.
Or daughters needing emergency orthodontic appointments. You were at Millwall. Just before we get further on, we have got a guest coming on. Amos from the Blackpool Gazette is going to join us at any moment to talk about Carl Joseph. Obviously, you probably have seen that the striker from Blackpool is joining Hull City. We expect confirmation on that today, hopefully. So we wanted to get a little insight onto what we can expect from Carl Joseph. Obviously, we've seen the glowing praise from Steve Bruce, which is probably worthy enough, but we wanted to get a bit more of an insight. So he'll be joining us at some point. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of transfers, because there's so much to go at and there's some news this morning, quick recap on Saturday and we'll get into a bit more later. Catherine, you were in the away end at the Den on Saturday. Boiling, wasn't it?
It was fantastic. I thought it was a really showed performance from start to finish. It was strange because I know Millwall had obviously lost, their top goal scorer and their main player, and it's kind of felt like they were a little bit lost. And I thought they were quite poor. And at times, I thought sometimes City a little bit got dragged down to their level. I think you could tell we were trying to play the ball around and sometimes just lacking a little bit of quality. And first half, there was a lot of long balls from both teams. Second half, I think we were the dominant team and deserved to win. And we got a little bit of luck finally with the goal. I think Regan Slater's probably deserved that with, bless him, the chances he's not managed to convert this season. So it was nice to see him kind of get involved with it, and really kind of pleasing to see them for them to see it out as well, keeping a clean sheet. So pretty decent performance, really. I thought Rushworth was a little bit shaky, a little bit at times, maybe a little bit of nerves in terms of playing the ball out from the back. But I think once he got over that in the first half, he looked pretty confident after that, and clearly he's comfortable getting the ball, in tight areas and giving it out to the defenders as well. And I think maybe that was always the question mark over Pando. So I think he kind of, repaid the manager, giving him the chance to start in goal. So pretty decent day at the office, I would say. Absolutely.
And a big reward for all those fans that left at silly o'clock. There was 1,800 of them down at the Den. And, it's one of those, isn't it, that as a fan of a club that aren't top of the table, aren't top of the Premier League and win pretty much every week, you go through the mill as a fan, don't you, away from home, and you go some really long trips at all hours in all weathers, and you see some maybe less than attractive football. But days like Millwall are those moments, aren't they, that you cling on to that make it kind of all worthwhile. And City, I guess, have had back-to-back, haven't they, with Blackburn now and Millwall? But it just kind of makes it that extra bit special, doesn't it, when you travel up and down the country and you get an away victory, particularly at the Den, where they've not won, I think, since 2013. So happy days.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I didn't have quite as early start as most of those poor fans, thankfully. I thought it was early because I live in London, but any 12 game just sort of feels like sometimes trekking from one side of London to the other, it feels like you could go to another city in that amount of time anyway. But when I heard the times that some of the fans in the away end were getting up to leave, and whether it was on the coaches or on Hull trains, it was, proper commitment. So I did feel a little bit sorry for their early starts, but as you say, more than worth it in the end.
We'll get into the nitty-gritty of what happened at Millwall, and there's some, as Catherine said, there's some. The Finn Burns topic is fascinating. There was lots. Carl Rushworth's another one. There were lots of interesting subplots to the win on Saturday. But one of the key things that did come out of Saturday was the news that Hull City had agreed a fee with Blackpool for Carl Joseph. That the player had undergone a medical. He'd been withdrawn from the Blackpool squad that drew 2-2 with Huddersfield at Bloomfield Road. So I'm delighted to say that it's almost perfect time, which rarely happens on the 1904 Club. You'll know. Amos has joined us. Amos from the Blackpool Gazette. Welcome, mate. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How about yourselves?
Yeah, we're kind of living in the success of an away win at Millwall, which is not something you can cheer every year, is it, Catherine?
It's not, and this could go really badly wrong, Baz. But Amos, were you at the same game as me last night?
I was indeed.
Oh, thank God it was right. I'm sure I recognised you from me and Amos were both at the Manchester Women's Derby last night. So, and I think you were at the Man City Barcelona games. And you came up there, and I was like, I know this man.
Yeah, we always tend to meet in nice places.
Amos, you've frozen on my screen. I don't know if you have on Catherine's screen, but so Carl Joseph. Then it looks like that deal's pretty much done. He's going to sign, from what I understand, a 3.5-year contract with the option of another year. So that's quite a long-term investment. Obviously, City are paying what, in the region of £2.5 million to get him. He's 23, scored a few goals in League One for Blackpool this season. What can you tell us about Kyle, and why is Steve Bruce such a big fan of him?
Well, this season he's been one of Blackpool's best players. He's energetic getting forward. He's he's a runner for the team, basically. He works hard, and Steve Bruce has got the best out of him. His first year at Blackpool didn't go to plan. He didn't quite click for him through injuries and selection. Well, this year he's been fantastic in terms of his work rate and, the energy. Goals, I don't know how many goals he'll get in the Championship. He's only got 7 this season. He has missed a number of chances. But in terms of everything else, his attacking play, he's been superb under Steve Bruce, and there's a reason why the manager loves him.
What would you describe him as? If you were trying to explain to Hull City fans that perhaps haven't seen much of him, or have only seen a few little bits of YouTube clips, how would you describe him as a player, as a striker?
He's more of a centre-forward player. He would work well with someone with a more natural poacher, more or less. He's someone who will run into the areas and stretch defences rather than being in the right position at the right time to score goals. Saying that in his last game for Blackpool, he did pop up with a winning stoppage time. So he can find the back of the net as well. But no, his more natural game is by just stretching the defence and running in behind.
He's 23, so he's obviously still really quite young. Do you feel that in a perhaps a different way of playing, with different players around him, he has got that ability to maybe go and score more goals? Because I think that is the concern from some City fans, is that City are a team that historically have struggled for goals. Even getting so close to the playoffs last season, they did struggle to score goals. It's been a massive problem this season, and probably the key reason why they are towards the bottom end of the Championship. Do you think he's got, at 23, he's got the room to be able to score more goals in a Ruben Selles team, perhaps?
Yeah, of course. I think there is a lot of room for development there, and it might just be a long-term project for the club where he might need, the first 6 months might be a bedding-in period for him to get used to, life at Hull, life in the Championship, and hopefully for you'll still be there next year, and he would have learnt from that, and he can carry on. We have seen improvements this year at Blackpool, and he was very highly thought of when he was at Wigan as a youngster. So there's clearly a very good player in there, and there's no reason why he can't improve those goals and assists.
Catherine, what's kind of your take on that signing? Because it is it's a permanent signing. It's they're spending £2.5 million on him. That in fairness to Blackpool have played a blinder. They had their figure that they wanted. City made a couple of bids that didn't reach that kind of level. There was a bit of an impasse, and ultimately Blackpool have eventually got what they wanted. How do you read that situation?
Yeah, from what I know, from people connected to Blackpool, it sounds like Kyle Joseph sort of fits the Ruben Selles kind of model in terms of he's a player that works really hard, and he will try and press a lot. He's got a lot of energy, and we know that's kind of key in Ruben Selles' teams, that you've got to work really hard and get up and down the pitch. In terms of being prolific goal scorer, I don't think that's what he is yet, and touching on kind of what Amos said, but I think City probably think this is a player they can develop and maybe can, turn into a more kind of poacher or a goal, someone that can get more goals, at a higher level. So it's a good profile. I think he will fit in to the team environment, and I think he'll fit in with the manager well. And it's not a massive, it's a reasonable amount of money, but I don't think it's not break the bank money for a player. I think it's kind of like it's enough of a gamble to say, it's one that they probably need to work out. But it's not like they've spent 10 million on a player, sort of thing. So I think it's a decent sort of promising signing. Sounded like he was quite a popular member of the Blackpool squad as well. So hopefully he kind of comes in, settles in quite quickly, and can make an impact, and hopefully we can improve him as well.
Amos, what's he like as a character? Because Catherine touched on there that he, from speaking to people at Blackpool, that he is a popular figure, and obviously we've seen Bruce's comments about him. He's exactly the type of player that he would want in his dressing room. What obviously you're around Blackpool, you talk to the manager, the staff, the players, etc. You'll have a good feeling for what he's like. What is he like as a person and as a professional?
I think he's very similar to what he's like on the field. Of course, he's got the hard-working nature, but also he's quite bubbly and good sense of humour. He seems quite a likeable lad from the experiences I've had speaking to him. I know there was an occasion earlier this season, Blackpool's last home winning back in September, where him and another player went and did a fist bump celebration at the end of the match, which is something the former manager used to do quite a lot. So, he's done a lot of things that the fans like. He seems to get on with the fans off the field as well. And just seems like a nice lad.
And how's this move been viewed kind of in Blackpool then? Because obviously, you're 10 points outside the playoffs after that sounds like a thrilling game against the Terriers on Saturday, and obviously losing your kind of centre forward, albeit for a decent fee, that could be viewed as a big blow. But tell us how it is being viewed over there.
Yeah, I'd say there's mixed feelings. Of course, last week Blackpool made a signing of Tom Bloxham from Shrewsbury, and there's lots of excitement over that. So it feels like you've taken a step forward and then two back, losing Joseph. What he's brought to the team this year, no other player currently at the club can do that. The other strikers don't have the legs to do the running that Kyle Joseph's done. And he's been very good for the team. So in that regard, it is disappointing, and he will leave a hole. And in January, are they going to be able to fill it? Probably not. It's going to be maybe the summer where they look to get a proper replacement for Kyle in. So for this season, it leaves it up in the air what happens and what it does to Blackpool's ambitions of pushing up the table. But equally, the fee that's been touted, it's a huge fee, and I think everyone except Blackpool can't turn that down. For the money for Kyle, it's a fantastic fee and can be reinvested into the squad in the long term. So there's mixed feelings, disappointment to see him go, but I think a lot of fans understand why it had to be accepted, of course.
Yeah, and Catherine, hearing Amos talk about Kyle's legs and his ability his energy, that will be music to their ears, won't it? Because, with the best will in the world, João Pedro, and we all love him, he's an absolute character. And he works his socks off, doesn't he, in that team? But he's not getting any younger. And having youthful legs around him is absolutely crucial, particularly when Ruben wants to stretch the game and get City up the pitch quickly.
So someone told me the average age of the front three on Saturday at the full time was 91 or something. So Kyle will definitely bring the average age down if he comes into the team. To be fair to João Pedro, I kind of joke in a way that it's because we all kind of love him, and he does work really, really hard. And to be fair to him, he's had to play a lot of games, and probably more games than he was expecting. And he's got through that winter period of Christmas where it was game after game, and he's still playing and he's still giving absolutely everything. So you can't fault him. But I think it might be music to his ears to hear that there might be somebody coming in that can do a bit more of the running for him up front, whether they can play up there together or wherever it's a case of it's one or the other. And, João gets a bit of a rest at times to then go again. I'm sure he'll be happy to hear that. But also, I think someone like João Pedro can probably be quite a good influence on a young Kyle Joseph that comes into the team. And as much as Pedro, as we say, maybe hasn't quite got the pace anymore, you can see when he plays, he's got the touches of a really kind of talented player, and you can kind of tell he's played at a high level when you watch him. And somebody like him can probably take a young Kyle Joseph under his wing a little bit and hopefully kind of help him out, and maybe Kyle can learn something from him as well.
Well, that's it. You've got Kyle Joseph coming in at the age of 23. You've got Joe Gauhart at 22. Maybe that's the ploy to try and make Pedro feel a little bit younger, because he is only, in fairness, Pedro is only 32. I know he looks 42.
And he's a pensioner, Baz, 32.
At 40, I've got no hope. But no, he does. He is a bit of a comedy, though, isn't he? There was a brilliant moment at the Den on Saturday, and I think it was in the first half, and there was a bit of, it was sort of kind of midway inside, I don't know if you remember it, midway inside the City half, but on the right-hand side, and the ball was to and fro, and it was a bit scrappy, and Pedro just came in and blazed it into the crowd and got out the person that the ball actually hit if it did hit somebody, because we couldn't see from the press box. But he was like, I've had enough of this nonsense. I'm just going to sort it out. And it was, but he is funny to watch, but he is all action, and he never stops, does he? And you can't fault. Sometimes people got questioned when older players come in, and we've raised it on this podcast over the last few months about, some signings that City might make. They need to make them for the right reasons and not just players coming in for the wrong reasons. Well, Pedro's been brilliant, hasn't he? He scored vital goals. Earlier in his tenure, when he was playing under the former manager, I think there was a game, it might have been the West Brom game, where, no, it can't have been that, 'cause he scored. I think he had 5 touches in the entire game, and he just wasn't being utilised. But now, under Ruben, he's front and centre, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he's not the only one that kind of wasn't being utilised under the previous manager, and no, I think he's doing, as I say, like I don't think you can fault him. I mean, where would we be if we didn't have his goals? We'd be bottom of the table probably, and he's proved to be a really important player this season. And like I say, I think he's probably had to play a lot more than probably he and probably we thought he would have to do when we signed him. And I think he's done fantastic so far, and hopefully now he's going to get a little bit more help so he can kind of, when he does play, he's a lot more fresh than probably what he is at the minute, because he's obviously been having to play 90 minutes most week. And he's probably going to have to go again on Tuesday, because I don't know whether, the players that are going to be coming in will be ready to start, or whether he will actually finally get a rest or not. I don't know. But as I say, because he's become kind of such an important player and that focal point, you would imagine he probably will start on Tuesday, and then he might have to go again on Friday. So, now he's probably got players that can come off the bench, and he doesn't maybe have to last 90 minutes as he was having to do before.
Amos, I guess somebody like Kyle will relish the opportunity to come in and play, learn off somebody so experienced as João Pedro, that's been around for so long, played, obviously one cap Italian international, grew up in Brazil, tremendous career. That is the sort of player that Kyle will look to learn off, won't he? And complement as well.
Yeah, he's not had bad teachers in his time in football so far, because at Blackpool last year and this year he's had Jordan Rhodes as well, so that EFL experience. So he's certainly learning from people with vast experience, and yeah, it will help him having that sort of older head on the shoulders kind of player next to him, and someone who can maybe make things easy for Kyle, making this step up back to the Championship, a level where he has experienced before, but yeah, obviously hoping he can stay there this time.
Yeah, it's been obviously he has played there before. How do you think he will kind of relish that step up and that because it's a big opportunity for him? Steve Bruce again said it was life-changing in terms of the type of contract he's getting, but he'll be coming into a buoyant dressing room today after obviously the weekend win at Millwall. I guess it's the sort of thing he'll be like, that youthful exuberance. Although he is 23, it's not he's not 17 or 18, but that opportunity for him is a big one, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a big chance to sort of prove himself and make that step back up again. And 6 months is a long time in football. Back in the summer, probably a lot of Blackpool fans weren't sure about him. His first year hadn't gone to plan at all. He'd suffered an injury. Well, he suffered an injury when he first came into the club, so didn't really have a pre-season. Picked up another injury on his debut, so he missed another 3 months. And then, like I said before, he was in and out the side. He couldn't really nail down his place. But then fast forward to this summer, full pre-season under his belt. A change in manager seemed to work in his favour as well. And he's been first name on the team sheet under Steve Bruce. So, yeah, be determined to make the most and build on, the good form of the last few months and put, his previous struggles behind him. So, yeah, it's a fantastic chance. And, yeah, he'll be desperate. And, yeah, he'll definitely try to make the most of it.
And Catherine, having another younger player coming into the dressing room is going to help that dressing room, isn't it? You've got, as we talked about earlier on, you've got Joe Gauhart, who's 22. Obviously, Matt Crooks is at the other end at 30, João Pedro at 32. But, having those younger players coming in, obviously we've got Elliot. We're expecting Elliot Matazo to come in as well. He's 22. So there is a kind of a very young feel to some of the signings, aren't there? Yeah,
definitely, especially the ones that come in permanently. Obviously, Gauhart, we don't kind of know how long he'll be, whether he just stays for the second half of this season and then goes back, or whether he could be a player that would return permanently or not. But for someone like Joseph, who was obviously going to sign permanently, he's a good age and profile, obviously, to build him into a better player. So long term, you obviously want to have kind of players that are not at the end of their career, that are kind of, at that good stage. So, and also just kind of balancing the dressing room. I think, like you say, you want those experienced heads and on the shoulders to make sure, firstly, that we get out of trouble. And I think you do need that experience when you're in those sorts of situations. But sometimes you also need the energy of the young players who have got a point to prove and are going to push the more senior players as well. So it's a good mix to have. And I think so far it's kind of shaping up to be what looks like, hopefully, a very good January transfer window for the team.
Well, Burns has said on this podcast for weeks and weeks leading into the window that he wanted experience. He felt that they needed to sign experience. Well, Nordin Amrabat at the age of 37, 38 on the 31st of March, Matt Crooks, two really experienced players. But on the flip side, you've got, Gauhart, who isn't particularly experienced at 22. On their level, obviously, Lincoln coming in from Fenerbahce, he's a bit older, and now Carl Joseph and Matazo. So there is a bit of a balance, but there is that element of experience, isn't there? Amrabat, what did you make of his cameo on Saturday?
I thought he was good. I thought he came on and worked quite hard. I mean, sort of similar to João Pedro, he's probably not got the legs to sort of sprint. Although he did look like he was going to get past Jake Cooper and potential of. I think it was 50-50, and then Cooper definitely pulled him down. But I don't know. I've not obviously seen it back to know for sure whether he could have had a potential free kick and what would have probably been a red card for Cooper, but he definitely looked like he could have outpaced him. So maybe he's deceptively a bit quicker than we imagined. But again, you can tell he's a player that's played at a high level. He's got that intelligence of when the ball's at his feet, being able to kind of pop it around, and just he won a lot of fouls that were quite clever. That was helpful when he came onto the pitch. It was just kind of like knowing when to pick up those fouls to ease the pressure on the team. He did that very well, and for a debut kind of cameo, I thought it was again pretty decent performance. And obviously, one of the best bits of the game was when Matt Crooks, I think, couldn't get his wedding ring off, and I still can't work out whether that was actually he genuinely couldn't get it off, or if it was all kind of like I saw someone sort of suggesting that it was all kind of like a dark arts trick, but I did genuinely look like he just couldn't get it off.
I know at Millwall it doesn't take much for the home fans to get outraged. But the fans around us in the press box were spewing from early on, and every swear word in the book you can imagine was coming out. Alex Neil was clueless for making the changes he made, everything else. But that moment when Crooks was taking an age to get on, and Alex Neil and his assistant were coming across, the referee was there. They were raging, absolutely raging, and I was like, this will either go one or two ways. This is either brilliant because it's disrupting momentum for Millwall in the closing stages, or the referee will add on 15 minutes at the end and they'll score in the last minute of it. But in the end, it worked out. Amos, before we let you go, talk to us about Steve Bruce. Obviously, worshipped in these parts up in East Yorkshire for what he achieved at Hull City. A huge influence in football, both as a player and as a manager. Incredible career, over 1,000 games. A lot of people were surprised when he'd been out the game for a little while, obviously hurt by what happened at Newcastle, but then pulls up at Bloomfield Road. What's he been like, and what's the feeling around Blackpool with Steve?
Well, I'm sure the majority of football fans were pleased to see him back in the game. I think throughout his time so far, he's been popular with the fans. I think they like just his honesty, the way he assesses games, and the things they can see he's trying to do. He's come in, changed the system. It's not really worked all the time because he's not had the personnel to sort of execute it. He's changed from a wing-back system to more of a 4-4-2. So a lack of wingers have been an issue, but when it's clicked, it's looked superb. They had a 3-0 win away to Reading last month where everyone was on it. His first month, he had a 4-game winning run. So, there's been good signs so far. Of course, there's been that inconsistency. He took time away from the dugout, of course, for around a month following a personal tragedy. So form did dip then. But with him actually in the dugout, on the whole, results have been positive, and majority of the time they come out with 3 points.
When you're a manager, like, there aren't many of them around like Steve that have got that experience of managed that many games. You're not coming back into management for money. You're doing it for the love of the game. You're doing it because probably, I think he said when he came on, we had him as a guest on the podcast a few back in the summer, and he was like, my missus has kicked me out. She wants me back in work. But you're doing it for the love of the game, aren't you? Do you feel that comes through when you're talking to him and him working on the training pitch day to day?
Yeah, of course. You can just see how much he loves being around the squad, being around the lads, being involved in the training ground and seeing the lads train. And yeah, that changing room environment that, of course, when you're out of it, you can't replicate. So you can see his passion for the game and his love of being there. Even the frustrations he's got over injuries and things like that. Although in the moment you must hate it, I think that's the kind of thing as a manager you just love to sort of tinker and change. So yeah, I think every element of it is enjoying being back involved in football and everything it brings.
It shows a lot about his character, doesn't it, as a human being as well. That having managed, some of the, you look at the clubs he's managed, Villa, Newcastle, obviously West Brom recently as well, Hull City in the Premier League, to then take a step, some would say, is a step down going into League One. A club that hasn't got a lot of money. That again would have been a big surprise to people, but it shows again just how much he loves football and how determined he is to get another promotion on his CV.
Yeah, it just shows, after 2 years away, that he was just willing to come back. He's got no airs and graces about where he goes or expects a certain level. He just wanted to get back in and get involved. I think it was a surprise to everyone when he went to Blackpool. His name hadn't been linked at all. They did very well to keep it under the radar. And I don't think many people thought about Steve Bruce making a return to football, but yeah, it's fantastic that he has. And yeah, it just says a lot that he's dropped down to the third tier. And because I'm sure, he could have put his name out for much bigger jobs in higher leagues and, be winning a chance of getting it. But yeah, the fact he's gone to Blackpool, just testament to the kind of person he is and the football lover he is.
10 points off the playoffs then, going into the final, 18, 19 games of the season. Is it doable?
Probably not. They have to turn around that home form quickly. I would like to be more positive, but they've only won twice at Bloomfield Road this season. A lot of those have been draws. 2-0 up against Huddersfield at the weekend. You think, here we go, this is the turnaround. But then 5 minutes of madness and the lead collapsed. So if they could get that home form right sooner rather than later, then they could make it an exciting end to the season. But the way it's been so far and the way they've dropped points, then you think it might just be too much and it could be building momentum towards last season. There's a lot of enjoyable things going on, and if they can get a good replacement for Joseph or someone who can step into his shoes temporarily on loan or something like that, then it will help matters. And the away form's been great. We went to Birmingham and competed well. Went to Wrexham and we only lost because a wonder goal and a controversial decision. So there's
that was quite dodgy, wasn't it? I saw Steve Bruce's comments after the Wrexham game. He wasn't happy at all, was he?
Yeah, safe to say, the Blackpool staff and the Blackpool team were furious. It was a penalty for handball, and on replays, you could see it clearly just smacked the player's back and not his arm. So, it was a foggy day, but the referee was a lot closer than everyone else, so he should have been able to see that. So, yeah, there was understandable frustration there, and especially when they had played so well and matched Wrexham and frustrated a good team like Wrexham to not come away with anything. Yeah, it was disappointing. But
Amos, does he still say dust yourselves down after games if they don't win?
Dust yourselves down.
There's been a couple of those so far.
Still dusting themselves down that was always his catchphrase. I mean, not just when he was at Hull, I'm sure he said it when he was at other clubs, but if the result didn't go his way, it was like, dust yourselves down and on to the next.
Amos, brilliant. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join us. There were so many questions on the 1904 club from from fans asking about Carl Joseph. So Jordan amongst those, Andrew as well. So thank you, Amos, for coming on. Hopefully we'll have Carl's move will be successful and we'll see how it goes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. Catherine, let's talk arrivals then, because there are 2 weeks to go. They've signed 3 already. So Carl Joseph, we expect that will be confirmed at some point on Monday, possibly Tuesday. 3.5-year contract with the option of another one. Elliot Matazo, a defensive midfielder coming in from Monaco. Let's talk a little bit about him. 22, played I think 3 times in the Champions League this season. He's played an awful lot for Monaco in Ligue 1. That is what's your thoughts on that signing?
It feels a little bit like a left field one in terms of it's not a player that we would have been able to kind of watch regularly or potentially know loads about, because we've not kind of come up against him before. But clearly it's a player in that position is something we needed, I think, in that kind of defensive midfield. We're not kind of stacked in that area in terms of depth. So it's definitely a position that I think we needed to strengthen. He's played at a very high level, is what I will say. So he's coming in with a pretty decent amount of experience in terms of playing at, a good standard. And you would hope that he would be able to come in and make an impact on the team and improve things. But I don't know, you probably know a little bit more about him than I do in terms of, kind of how excited the club are to get him and, just kind of how good he can be. The only other concern is when you sign a player that's from abroad and how long it might take them to settle into like, a new culture and a new league, and, whether he might need a little bit of bedding in time. And he's obviously only 22, so he's not kind of massively maybe experienced in terms of age, but obviously, like I say, has played at a high level. But how he kind of fits into playing in the Championship will be interesting to see.
I think they're really excited. I think from what I've heard, he sounds really determined to come and play. He's not, he's not coming over here to sit on the bench and take his time to settle in. He's coming. He wants to play. What it does do is create a fascinating situation, because obviously we've talked about Steven Alzate before. He's been brilliant. He looks every inch a Premier League player. Thought he was exceptional at Millwall again on Saturday. But a lot of questions coming in. Al Nacho, Tom, amongst others, asking about, signing Matazo, what does that mean for Oscar Zambrano? Well, as I understand it at the minute, obviously Zambrano is currently suspended. We know that. We believe, from what I've heard, the CAS hearing, the Court of Arbitration for Sport hearing, is likely to be the end of next month, the end of February, when they're hoping that ban will be reduced. I don't think it's going to be reduced to a small amount of time, but maybe 12 months. I think the feeling at the football club still is that they will support him and that they will look to try and sign him as well. So, I mean, it does beg the question: do they need Alzate? He's on a 2-year +1 contract. You sign Matazo, that's going to be you would think a 3-year contract at least. You've then got Zambrano. Do you need 3 number 6s? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that you need a Zambrano if you're signing Matazo. What's your assessment, Catherine?
Zambrano's the question mark, isn't it? I think in terms of taking him kind of out of the equation for now, in terms of like what's available. I think with Alzate, obviously he's been brilliant, but there is always that kind of fear that he could pick up an injury because he went so long without playing. If he was to suddenly be ruled out for 6-7 weeks, you would have a big problem. So it's always kind of good to have two good options in that number 6 area. Obviously that doesn't happen. Hopefully that doesn't happen with Alzate, but you don't ever want to be in a position where you're kind of like, well, we've got the player we need. We don't need anybody else. But then suddenly he picks up an injury or a suspension or something like that. But then when you bring, as you say, if you bring Zambrano then back into the question, whenever we know what the verdict is of that, obviously that's kind of, again, we don't know what's going to happen, and it's all seems to be a little bit up in the air. And if he is kind of cleared, when he would come back into being available, and it's kind of difficult to know, and there's a lot of moving parts with that. But again, like when we saw him play, he was pretty. I thought it was pretty impressed when we did see him play, and that was obviously under the previous manager when everything was a bit kind of up and down and chaotic. So you imagine him kind of coming into a Ruben Selles team, it'd be probably be even kind of better than what we saw before. So if they're actually confident that he's going to be cleared of the charges and then going to be available and they're going to keep him, then yeah, that suddenly you have got three options when we were down to sort of one. But I suppose you'd rather have more options than not. And maybe if you get into the position where Zambrano is kind of back and available, you never know that somebody might be looking at an Alzate to sign him. We kind of talked about how good he is. If we're assuming we're going to be in the Championship next season, there might be a Premier League team that has a look at him. He's been at that level before. If he kind of goes through the rest of the season staying fit and doing as well as he has, there might be somebody or potentially another Championship team, maybe higher up the table, that fancies kind of trying to sign him. I suppose it depends who's available when, and then I guess it's down to the manager to make the decision.
That's the thing. And on Zambrano, so he was given a 16-month ban on the 5th of November. And obviously he's been out, we're now at the 20th of January. So he's been out for 3 months. Even if he gets it reduced at the back end of February, he's going to have not played. I mean, it's unreal. I think it's unrealistic to expect that ban is reduced so much that you see him again this season. So I think I'm pretty convinced you write off this season. Then even if it gets reduced to 12 months, he's available again in November. He's not played for a year. That's a long time to be out. So he's not training with Hull City. It's a really, really difficult situation. So I kind of think you kind of almost have to forget Zambrano and say, look, we'll deal with that when we know what, nobody knows what the outcome's going to be. It's going to be, we'll find out hopefully at the end of next month. But until then, it's a moot point. He's not there. You've got to forget about him. Although, as I said before, he's still on the wage bill, so they're still paying him until the end of the season. But if, I think the club's feeling is potentially they could, because of the ban and that situation, they could get him on a significantly reduced transfer fee. But that's even if it's reduced to a year, he's not available until November. So I think we've got to part that. And you say, look, you've got Alzate and Matazo. I'm not sure what it means for Xavier Simons. In fairness, I think that's obviously his position. Does that mean that he's a player they look to move on? Because even now you've got Alzate is clearly the first choice, and rightly so, because he's very, very good. Matazo's coming in and he's played at the top level in France, and I know it was only a cameo, but he came off the bench against Arsenal back in November in the Champions League. So he's got a big pedigree, and you kind of feel for Xavier that maybe he gets pushed down to third choice and has to look elsewhere.
Yeah, and I do think it's been difficult for him since the manager switchover. He played a lot under Tim Walter, and he was probably one of the more consistent players. And he had that run where I think he scored 2 or 3 games in a row, and it looked like maybe finally he'd kind of settled as a Hull City player after obviously not playing, going out on loan previously and then not playing that much. But I think since Ruben Selles has come in, he had that injury, which obviously don't think helped him. And I just don't think he's quite been the same player since he came back from that. And maybe he's seen players kind of come in and take his position and potentially lost a little bit of confidence from it. And I just don't think he's quite managed to be as good sort of this part of the season as he was earlier on. And one of the games he came off the bench, I can't remember if it was Leeds or actually in the cup game, where a couple of times he had the ball and space kind of opened up for him to kind of have a shot. And we know he's got a good shot on him. And instead of kind of taking that opportunity, whereas maybe earlier in the season he would have done, he kind of looked to try and pass instead. And I was still surprised he didn't take a penalty against Doncaster, given his kind of, how good he is with his finishing. But I do wonder if maybe his long-term future isn't with Hull City, and it might be that he kind of has to look for a move, especially if suddenly, he's got more competition in that area. And, if he was to drop off the bench, for example, then I think he probably would have to be moved on.
Yeah, so let's take stock of where we are in terms of, because there's so many moving parts, so many things happening. So City have signed, let's just to recap, City have signed Matt Crooks, Joe Gowhart and Nordin Amrabat. All three made the debut off the bench on Saturday at the Den. We are expecting Lincoln Henrique from Fenerbahce a loan deal until the end of the season. We're expecting that to be ratified either today or tomorrow. He's due his medical today. Carl Joseph, we're told, is done. That's a case of just to get it announced. And obviously, there's Elliot Matazo. They've agreed a fee with Monaco in the region of 1.8 million. The player is keen on the move. He's due over for a medical, not done yet, but there's a feeling it's getting towards that stage. They also obviously want to sign another winger. Louis Barry is a player they want. I know I've seen links to Celtic this morning. City still feel they've got a very good chance of getting Louis Barry, complete, as do probably most of the Championship, in fairness. So we're still waiting on Aston Villa's decision. The mystery winger that we've talked about for weeks is still being held up, frustratingly, I think, for Hull City. Nothing to do with them, from what I've been told. There is an issue that is there. They were expecting it done well over a week ago now. It still hasn't been done, and you kind of think the longer it goes on, it probably won't get done. But the winger stroke Louis Barry, you won't get both of them. It'll be either or. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. The left back is some. I think it was Jordan that raised it. Was it Jordan? Just bear with me a second. Let me see who. I'm trying to find. I've got that many messages. Thank you so much for everybody that came in, that sent messages in. This was Burns' job. We need to get Burns in.
And then it was James's job, and then people just keep shirking their duties. It's unacceptable.
Yeah, this is it. So left back is clearly an issue. We know that Ryan Giles was left out of the squad on Saturday at the Den. Ruben Selles felt him and Ryan Longman weren't in the right frame of mind to be involved. We expect the deal to Borough to get done this week. So they are chasing the left back. People have raised. Wayne raises the issue of Sean McLaughlin. Thought he was exceptional on Saturday, wasn't he, Catherine? At left back.
Yeah, considering I don't know if I don't think I've seen him play at left back before. Again, I think maybe first half he was a little bit kind of getting dragged inwards naturally, as a centre back probably would do. But again, second half, I think Millwall did maybe change who was on his. I think George Honeyman went down his side in the second half, which is probably a player he knows quite well from the time they played together, and he coped pretty well with him, and we didn't really see Honeyman involved at all. And as I say, for a centre back playing at left back, I thought he did a pretty good job. My only fear with that is when you come up against better wingers, you're thinking about QPR, who are in good form. You're thinking about Sheffield United, who are in the top 2, top 3 of the league. He might get exposed a little bit more and be put under more pressure. So I don't think it's a long-term solution. But for the game, game against Millwall, who've got a lot of height, having an extra centre back in actually did kind of help, and it's an option if we need it. But I'm not sure if it's a long-term solution to the left back issue.
No, absolutely not. It was a stopgap, wasn't it? But actually, as you quite rightly say, it was really effective having him in there because of the height and the set plays. But no, so they are looking at a left back. They're hopeful of. It's nowhere near done yet, but they are hopeful of getting a left back. That I believe that would be a loan deal, which presents another problem. But we'll come to that in a little while. So Giles on his way, Ryan Longman on his way, another couple of players going out. We touched at the start before Amos joined us about Finn Burns. Now, obviously, Finn hasn't, that was his first league start since the Sheffield United game back in September. But interestingly, how did you think he did, Finn, on Saturday?
I thought it was excellent. I think for a player that's not played hardly at all for us this season, and I think people were forgetting he was kind of still there. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was calm on the ball, assured. His positioning was very good. He looked really comfortable alongside Alfie Jones, and I was really impressed with him. And it just kind of makes it feel even more bizarre about how he was kind of seemingly frozen out under Tim Volter, and we just didn't see him play apart from the odd time in sort of defensive midfield. And he was kind of never seen again after that Sheffield United performance. So I was really impressed with him. I was kind of saying to you, I mean, when Charlie Hughes comes back from injury, Alfie Jones is obviously playing pretty well. Finn Burns keeps playing like that. Charlie will have a job on his hands to get back into the team at centre back, because that partnership between Jones and Burns looked really strong on Saturday. Yeah,
and so from speaking to Ruben over the last few weeks, he's been really impressed with Finn. He's a big fan of him. Loves him as a person. Loves his attitude. Loves how he trains. He's had to be patient, of course. He obviously played against Doncaster, and then I thought he had a rocky couple of moments early on against Ivanovic up front, but then seemed to move very quickly on and was very, very good. Now I think that's changed. I think Finn Burns is kind of not rise to prominence necessarily, but I think what Ruben sees in him has changed their transfer policy. They were after a centre half. We know that they wanted Willy Bolly. Forest said no. They wanted Ryan Porteous. That deal was described to me as really difficult at the time, but they were trying. But I think Finn Burns has changed their mind. From what I gather, they're not now seeking a centre back. And you've got Burns has come back into the fold. You've got Sean McLaughlin. You've got Alfie Jones. You've got Charlie Hughes. I saw Charlie at the training ground the other day, and he was back on the grass. And he said he roughly about 5 weeks until he's back available. So they've got 4 centre backs, and obviously Cody Drame can play there if needed. The left back that they're trying to sign potentially could shift in there if needed. So it suddenly feels like they're quite well stocked. Are you in agreement, Catherine, that actually making the use out of Burns, as given he's one of your loan players as well, that you're paying a lot of money for, you stick with him until the summer?
I think so. I mean, it depends very much if there's anyone out there that's better at this moment in time that they can actually get. And, are they going to significantly improve the team? And I know it's only one game for Burns, and we can't kind of read too much into it. But again, I think he looked assured, he looked comfortable, and I think with him and Alfie Jones, it looked like a very good partnership. And you would hope it would only get better the more they played together. And for me, it just kind of bizarre that he was just frozen out of the team. I mean, I still can't really get my head around it that you would bring a player in on loan and then just not give them a look in at all. And for quite a few weeks he was just wasn't on the bench at all. So it can't have been easy for him as well. Coming into a club on loan from Man City and then just not really being around the team at all. So he's clearly got a strong character as well, and he's clearly pretty resilient. So for me, I'd be very much happy keeping him. And then, as you say, the options that you've got, Jones, Burns, Hughes coming back, and McLaughlin as well. I think they're four pretty decent options to have.
On one of many questions, and thanks again for everybody that hopefully we've. Carl asks, are we excited by the arrival of Carl Joseph? Hopefully we got that answered with Amos earlier on. CB asks, how many signings in total? Well, I gather 8, including the ones that have been signed already. So it's a bit more than the kind of 4 that we thought at the start. Well, a few months ago, maybe October time, we were told roughly about 4. Well, it's doubled. So 8 altogether. Obviously, they've dropped off the centre half. So we know the players we know about are already out there. The left back and the winger are the 2 they're trying to get done. But what the caveat I would throw into that mix, Catherine, is that it is Hull City. We know Adjun loves a deadline day. This is just my opinion, by the way. I struggle to imagine that they've got all their business right. Let's say they sign the left back this week, done. You get Louis Barry or you get the other winger, done. That's all 8 signings with a week to go. I struggle to think that Hull City will conclude their business that early in the window and not have any last-minute drama on deadline day. Are you with me or against me?
It'd be very off-brand to sort of settle everything before the deadline day and not have anything last-minute happen. So I'm kind of with you. It feels like, I don't know, sometimes clubs seem to quite enjoy the whole thing about deadline day is sort of you kind of get involved and you don't or you don't. And I think sometimes clubs quite like that sort of almost like theatre, isn't it, in a weird way, that everything kind of gets left to deadline day and suddenly a player that it just ends up going to a club that's kind of not been talked about before. So I also wouldn't be surprised if there was a late twist kind of thrown in there, which isn't good news for you, because it means you'll have a late night.
Well, I'm going to have a late. I mean, in fairness, I'm guaranteed to have a late night on deadline day, irrespective of I'll be there teed up, waiting for something to happen, having to try and drum up interest. So I'll be having a late night irrespective. But I don't know. Adjun said himself that he said he said back in the summer he loves deadline day. He loves the theatre, as you said. He loves the theatre of it. I don't know. I just can't see a situation. I can't envisage a situation where Hull City have got all their business wrapped up, and Jared Dublin, Mustafa Mertan, David Beebe, and all the media lads at the club are all sat there on, in fact, I've taken a day's holiday on deadline day, and I've had a day off on the golf course or in the spa or whatever they like to do. I just cannot fathom that is going to be the situation. So we are going to have to wait and see on that. But there will be more arrivals. There will be more departures. Obviously, we know that Malem and Will Jarvis have gone. We're still expecting Rachopi. I think he's got a loan with a view to a permanent move option on the table. Chris Pedro, I think, has got 3 or 4 potential offers on the table. We know Giles to Borough. We expect Ryan Longman to Oxford United, and there might be 1 or 2 other departures because they need that obviously to free up space in the squad. I know we are heading towards time, Catherine. There's still a lot to cover yet quickly. The loan situation. Obviously, you can only name 5 loans in a squad. If they get, let's just run through it quickly. So on Saturday, we had Carl Rushworth, Finn Burns and Gustavo Puerta. Gelhardt came off the bench. So that is, 1, 2, 3, 4 loan players in the squad. The left back they're trying to sign would be a loan as well. And Lincoln Henrique coming in from Fenerbahce, as it stands, would be a loan as well. So that tips them over the edge. How do they get around that?
Good question. Very good question, Baz. I can't think of who would be dropping off, who would be dropping out of the team, because you've brought, this is the thing when you sign loan players, they're coming to play. That's the whole kind of point of why they've made the move. I mean, if Rushworth's going to be we assuming he's going to kind of keep the shirt now, but even if he was to, to play for Pando was to come back in, you'd still have to have him on the bench. So he can't really drop out. We've just kind of spoken about Burns and obviously if Charlie Hughes, when he comes back to fitness, if he came back in and won his place back, I suppose maybe Burns would, but then you would still probably think he'd be on the bench rather than just dropping out of the squad completely if that was to happen. Puerta, I can't imagine dropping out. He's pretty much a mainstay in the team. There might be competition for places in that area, I suppose, once all these other players come in. Maybe he actually might have a bit of a battle to keep his place a little bit. So that's 3. Then the other players, obviously, Gelhardt's come to play. He's probably not going to be happy if he's not at least on the bench. And Lincoln and the left back they need. I'm struggling, Baz. I don't know what they're going to do. I'm struggling to find a player who you would drop out from that.
I guess the one way they could get around it is by, as Richard Eglin asks on social media about Puerta making it permanent. Obviously, we know there's a clause in that deal that says when he plays, I think it's half the games, that they have to make that deal permanent, which I think there are discussions ongoing. I think so. Whether that's something they could look to do and make Puerta's deal permanent, that takes away that issue. You mentioned Gelhardt earlier on. I spoke to Ruben about Gelhardt because I said my question to him was kind of like, it is only a loan, but are you signing him just on loan as a stopgap, a short term to get to the end of the season, or are you signing him with a view to making that move permanent potentially in the summer? Because let's be realistic, Gelhardt, he looked really bright, and I'm a big fan of him, but he can't get in the Leeds team in the Championship. If they get promoted, with respect, it's almost impossible that he's going to get a look in the Premier League, as much as we hope Leeds fall apart and it doesn't happen. But so he would like to see Gelhardt arrive in the summer. Boxes need to be ticked. The financial package needs to be right. First and foremost, Hull City need to be a Championship football club, and also Gelhardt needs to, he needs to earn that move. He's not just going to be giving it. So there's a few moving parts and things that need to fall into place. But they would like, as it stands now, to make that move permanent in the summer. I think he fits exactly the profile that we've talked about that Ruben likes, similar to Carl Joseph as well. So, but it is an interesting conundrum, isn't it, for the manager to deal with when he's got 6 players going into 5 spaces.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, making Puerta permanent, if they could do that sort of, sooner rather than later, whenever that kind of happens, that would probably, as you say, that would remove the issue. But I guess it's whether they're in a position to do that at the right time. But you just got him listing all the players that Selles is going to have available to him now. And I remember Casey Palmer obviously has got to come back from injury at some point, and the options that suddenly we seem to have in the attacking kind of forward areas is really, really, broad now. And you probably are going to be in a position where players are fighting for a place just to get onto the bench, because I looked at the bench on Saturday and suddenly everything, I was like, God, the bench looks a lot stronger than it has done for quite a while. And, when you've got all these new players to come in, it is going to be actually really difficult for the manager to kind of keep everybody happy. So obviously not surprised someone like Ryan Longman's obviously on his way, because he was probably just never going to get a look in when all the business is kind of finally done. So I mean, it's a good problem to have for the manager, because you need options, and we obviously want to move up the table, but it is going to give him a bit of a headache at times, I think, potentially trying to keep everybody happy.
Just very quickly, Rushworth or Pandor going forward, starting with QPR tomorrow night?
I think now you've made the change, I think you've got to stick with it. Like I say, there was a couple of times when Rushworth played out from the back where his passing was a little bit dicey. Millwall actually did press quite high. I noticed they sort of stopped doing that in the second half. But first half, they were right up on the edge of the box, almost like knowing that we were going to try and play out from the back. And then it sort of did make it a little bit difficult. The only thing I would say about, when you play out from the back, sometimes it can be quite easy to blame the goalkeeper. But also when you play the ball, your defenders have got to be good enough to take it and actually keep it and then work their way out as well. So it's kind of twofold. But I think now you've made the goalkeeper change. If you then go back to Pandor, it's almost kind of like, I think you need to kind of have a settled goalkeeper and a settled back four. And I'd probably just keep Rushworth now, I think. Two difficult games coming up, obviously, and you probably just want to keep it sort of settled.
Yeah. Danny, thank you for your question on the Championship relegation battle. We're not going to get time to cover that today, unfortunately, but we will. Once we've got the next two games out of the way, we will cover that, because we'll have a greater idea of where things stand. Of course, City outside the bottom three as it stands, and importantly, although Cardiff did win and thumped Swansea, it dragged other teams down. Obviously, it dragged Luton down. It's dragged Derby County down. Stoke aren't out of the woods yet. Even Millwall as well. So, a long way to go, but we'll cover that again. Just finally, we've obviously got the small matter of QPR on Tuesday night. Mark Peacock, Catherine, thinks it's must win, given City are bottom of the form table at home, awful home record this season. QPR one defeat they were bottom of the table at 12 games ago. One defeat in 12 now, 3 wins on the spin, a win at Plymouth, which would have been is always a difficult game at Plymouth, cliche, but with a new manager, that was added to that. But they won at Home Park, so they're coming here, and I think it's the first time. I'm sure I read it's the first time that QPR have been in the top 12 of the Championship for 2 years. So they're coming here in great form. It will be a really, really difficult game. Obviously, goes without saying, but also a massive opportunity for City, who will be, as I said at the top of the show, buoyed by Millwall, and obviously the Leeds game last time out at home in the Championship. Yeah,
it's 2 difficult games coming up, isn't it? QPR and then Sheffield United, and I don't think to say QPR is must win. I think maybe if we'd have lost at Millwall, or if we hadn't won at Millwall, you would have been kind of getting a bit concerned, because there are teams around the bottom that are seemingly picking up points. So you don't want to fall behind. But QPR are in such a good run of form that I do think it's going to be really difficult. And you want to see City build a bit of momentum. And obviously, kind of, it would be fantastic to get another win to take to Sheffield United, which is going to be another difficult game on Friday. But I've been really impressed with kind of how QPR have lifted themselves out of trouble, and potentially even they're looking upwards rather than looking down right now. So it will be a really difficult one. But hopefully, as you say, we can try and build a little bit of momentum rather than kind of taking 2 steps forward and one step back, which we've kind of done a few times this season. But my biggest problem, Baz, is that on Friday, the game clashes with the Traitors final. I'm very concerned about that. I'm not going to lie. I've watched the first half and then I've got a very big decision to make about what I do. I might have to judge what the score is.
Put one on the telly and one on your phone or on
one
the iPad.
One on the telly and one on the laptop. Yeah, I could do that.
Sit on the telly, and if it starts going belly up, move that
Switch
to the phone.
Around.
Yeah. I've got to be honest, it's not something I've watched. It will probably be something that I'll watch at some point in a year's time and blitz it and watch all the episodes.
Tim Volta will probably end up on there in a few years. He'd make a good traitor.
On that bombshell, thank you everybody for watching and listening. Apologies we've not had Fletch and Captain Prutton. I think genuinely, this is my theory, that the orthodontics is a ruse, because Prutz was guest of honour at Forest Southampton on Sunday afternoon. And I think he was ploughed with alcohol and food, and is in a food alcohol coma this morning. So I think the fanciful trip to the dentist is just a cover story for his ill health. But thank you to Amos for joining us to talk about Carl Joseph. Catherine, thank you for joining us to talk about City and everything else.
You're welcome, Baz, and hopefully the other two will be back with us next week.
Oh,
maybe not. Maybe not.
Numbers will certainly drop if they do. And thanks to the lots of questions that came in. Apologies we didn't I read them all, but hopefully we have answered your questions. If we haven't, we'll try and get to them on the next edition of the 1904 Club. Here's hoping that City make it 2 wins from 2 against QPR on Tuesday night. If you're going to the MKM, sing loud and proud, and we will see you there. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.